Hi, Dave Borton, along with Joe Morocco from Cafe Imports. We're here to roast with you today. And then Joe has brought along some greens defects, and we're going to talk about greens today.
That's right.
The coffee we're going to be roasting is a coffee that I have bought for at least 8 years. Los Naranjos, the oranges, from the Huila district in Colombia. 97 different farmers bring us that coffee. Really good. We've been slurping it here in the office and at home. So Joe is going to roast that, and whoever comes in with the best question of the day gets the roast. We'll
mail it to you for free.
Joe is the judge and the jury on this, so it'll be all yours. We've got a kilo of the Los Naranjos measured out. It's coffee of the month. We've got it available on the website. It's going to take us about 20 minutes to get it started, talk you through it. Joe's going to be roasting on it. Then we're going to turn it over to defects and what you should be looking for, and so you can identify your common greens defects.
That's right.
Are you ready, my friend?
I am ready. So a couple of things to think about with this coffee. For one, it is a very dense coffee. It's a very high-grown coffee. Two, it is from a bunch of different farmers, and so it's going to be a little bit of a different screen size. I would say somewhere between 15 and 18 screen size. So both of those two things, the fact that it's different screen size and the fact that it's a more dense coffee, means that we're going to give this a good amount of time. I've been playing around with this coffee a little and find that actually a little bit more time during what we would call the Maillard reaction, or the beginning of that exothermic reaction time after it turns yellow, really helps to bring out a lot of characteristic in this coffee. So let's get started.
I want to see how you do that.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll listen to you.
All right. So one thing to think about is I've been holding this roaster steady at 410 degrees now for what, 10-15 minutes? So we have a very thoroughly heated roaster that is also very stable at where its heat is. I haven't brought it up to 415 and then opened up the door to get it to cool down to 410, or I haven't brought it to 400 and then ramped up the temperature to get it up to 410. It's been holding steady at that temperature for a long time, so I know that's the real temperature of the drum. Although now that I'm saying that, it's at 411, but that's okay. All right, are you ready, sir?
Yep.
Okay, let's get started. Charging. I have my airflow low, and I'm going to turn my gas down now that I have my coffee in the drum. My gas is going to be at about 2 inches on this drum. I don't want to get it too low because I don't want the flame to turn off. And the reason I turn that gas on again before I fire up the roast or put the coffee in the roaster is I don't want to have the gas off and then go to turn it on with coffee in the drum and not be able to start that flame. I want to be able to control it all the way from the beginning.
Joe, we were talking before the live stream today, and some of the guys are roasting with their air on zero. You want to talk about that?
If your air is on zero, your air is not actually on zero unless you have a fan that is now turned completely off. If you turn your fan completely off, then any kind of noxious fumes that you're getting in your drum are not going to be sucked out. You have to have at least a little bit of airflow moving through your drum, especially with an open flame system. If you have something like a Diedrich machine or a machine that has a damper on it, even if you close that damper to being completely closed off, it's still allowing about 20% of air. If you think about, Dave brought up a really good example of a window. If you're in a house and you open the window just a crack, that doesn't mean that if it's open 10% that you're allowing 10% of air to move through. That means that air is pulling through, it's tightening and going through at a pretty high percentage still. So now we're at 130, I'm gonna ramp this up a bit.
So I think the moral of that story is if your roaster has a fan, you shouldn't be roasting with the fan at zero.
That's right. You should still keep it on at least about 20% capacity to make sure that you're getting stuff out of your drum. You don't want to put any noxious fumes into your coffee. So I've got my fan at about 30 on this particular machine, which is very low movement of air. I want to build up a little pressure in here. I don't want to build up too much pressure. I want to keep oxygen moving through the system.
2 minutes, 260.
We're at 2 minutes at 260, and what is our rate of rise? We have turned around.
About 30.
Yes, we're at about 30-degree rate of rise. We're going to have a little bit of a slower rate of rise here in a bit. Now we're getting up there around, yeah, it's kind of bouncing a little. We'll give it a minute to adjust as it's coming out of its turnaround.
Yeah, this is probably set at 2-second increments. I like to roast with a 6-second increment. And we just installed this, and the settings are probably sitting at 2-second increment. Yes, Nick?
We've had 2 questions about what you're drinking right now.
That would be water from the Mississippi River.
Delicious. And another, yes, deep, nice and clear, plain the lakes. What charge temp did you use?
Oh, the charge temp was 410. And I wanted to have a little bit higher charge temp and then hit it with a little less gas because I want that conductive energy. I want the coffee to act like a sponge and soak in the energy that was stored in the drum. But I don't want to hit it too hard. I want it to soak in that energy and start moving, but I don't want it to move too quickly.
3 minutes, 300.
3 minutes and 300.
You're at about 20 for your rate of rise.
20, so that's about 10 per 30 seconds. 5 inches of gas. And I'm checking this to see if there's any yellowing. Starting to see a little coloration. I'm not seeing anything blowing out of the drum, which means that I don't have too much pressure stifled up in that drum. How are we looking?
You are at 4 minutes, 15 seconds, 313.
All right. I'm going to turn up my gas a little bit more now. To about 6. Just a touch.
6 inches, natural gas.
And I'm going to open up my airflow now to about 40 because I'm starting to see a little color change on my coffee.
Should be right at drying in.
We're getting closer to dry.
Five minutes, 325.
Great.
You want me to mark it? Not
mark
yet.
it.
Joe's calling dry at 325 Fahrenheit.
You can see that's very yellow.
Here's your... What were we going to discuss?
So we're going to slow this down a little bit here in a moment. Where are we at on rate of rise?
You're at 21. Your bean temp is 335.
Okay, so now I'm going to bring this gas back down a little. It's about 4. And then as soon as I start seeing a little bit deeper gold color on this coffee, I know that I'm in the Maillard reaction, and that Maillard reaction, in order for it to really build flavor, needs to have no moisture present. So I want to make sure that I've got my airflow really moving through for the Maillard reaction to take place and for my caramelization to start taking place, to really start breaking down the flavor.
Want to talk about Columbia variety for a minute?
Go for it.
This coffee is both Caturra and Columbia variety. And as many of you know, the
60 on airflow.
Joe's got it full open at 60. The Columbia variety has some Catamore heritage. I did not check the varieties, and that's intentional when I cupped it. And I tasted no Catamore at all. And so I said to Joe, this has to be second generation Colombia. And Joe said what?
I said it has to be at least 6th generation for you to be able to call it a specific variety. Whenever you're doing variety development, you have to go at least 6 generations before that generation really takes on its own specific variety. Earlier than that, then when you're propagating a new crop, and this is true for many plants, this is just a botanical fact. If you're fewer than 6 generations, then you can still get that the characteristics from whatever parentage you have in that crop. So for it to be a specific variety, it has to be about 6 generations in.
So we are at almost 8 minutes, 3:53.
All right, so we've slowed down quite a bit. Not baking. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, what I'm saying is, earlier Colombia, you could pick out that Catamore, I think, a little bit more clearly. And now, I'm hard pressed to find any of that Catamore root
Yeah.
in that Colombia variety. And again, we're not talking about the country of Colombia. This happens to be from Colombia, but we're talking about the variety Colombia, which was developed to help deal with the rust fungus that hit Colombia in the Western Hemisphere probably earlier than it did in Central America.
Yeah, Colombia had a majorly devastating bout with Roya right around 2000, what was it, 2009, 2000 to 2011. It was a really bad dip in the production because they had Roya just wipe out all kinds of plants. So that's when you see a lot of Colombia variety, a lot of Castillo variety, because farms just couldn't exist without those varieties.
You're at 9 minutes, 3:65.
Okay. So now we're getting closer to first crack. Yeah, I'm gonna ramp up the gas just a bit here. We're at about 4.5. And now I hear first crack. Remember, I have full airflow moving. First crack was right at 9 minutes and 30 seconds.
What's throwing us off here is I've got to add 20 degrees to artisan. Put in that interval so that it's corresponding with actual temps.
Gotcha. Yeah, so sometimes your thermocouplers are going to be weird. You're going to get weird numbers. That's why it's so important to pay close attention to your coffee. I was able to smell the coffee, even though the numbers over there were saying one thing. Smelling the coffee, looking at the coffee was telling me we're about to hit first crack. The numbers are saying very different things to me, but I'm going by the coffee.
Yes, Mr. Nick.
I'm going to turn this back down. Sorry.
Earhart asks, slow start, fast finish versus fast start, slow finish. How to apply for different oranges?
Great question.
Let him feel that after he gets this. He's got a lot of things on his hands right about now.
We're at. I moved the gas here to about 3.75 again. We're still cracking. And I will get to that question here in one moment.
I wonder if he's going to get question of the day.
It's a good one.
And if I ask a good question, do I get the coffee?
No, you don't.
Oh,
Unfortunately, no. But we can do a second roast for you.
Ben's got a quick question that maybe Dave can answer.
maybe not.
Maybe not. Have they been able to breed a lot of the undesirables out of Catamore?
Joe's nodding his head yes.
Out of
so
Catamore, did you say?
Out of Catamore, yep.
Catamore is Catamore.
Yeah, Catamore, it still tastes like Catamore. Sorry, I was thinking Castillo or Colombia when you asked that question initially.
So if we're talking the variety Catamore, it remains Catamore. In terms of Castillo and Colombia varieties, in my opinion, and this is strictly based on a cupping table, they've gotten rid of a lot of the telltale heritage taste of the Catamore. Would you concur?
Right. We're going to close this here. Sorry. And dropping now. What was that question again?
Have they been able to breed the Colombia and the Castillo to have it less characteristics of a Catamore?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a big talk that happened at symposium last year at the SCAA. You can get on the SCAA website and watch that talk. It's specifically talking about the flavor characteristics of Castillo and how they have moved Castillo to tasting very similar to Caturra. Now, talking about the way that a specific variety tastes, there are some varieties that have very unique and potent characteristics. There are other varieties that are more adaptable in the characteristics that they have. So, like for instance, I'm very shy about saying this tastes like Bourbon. I'm very shy about saying this tastes like Typica because those coffees taste so vastly different in different scenarios in which they grow. However, coffees like Catamore have a very specific and strong characteristic that seems to accompany them all the time. Just like the species of Robusta has a very specific kind of rubber band flavor that you almost always get no matter where it grows. The same can be true on the positive side when you talk about a coffee like Geisha. Even a low-grown Geisha will sometimes have that hint of floral note that tells you that, yes, this is a Geisha, maybe not the best Geisha in the world.
I bet you could pick a Bourbon off a table.
If I was told there was one Bourbon on a table, I could probably pick out which one it was, depending on what the other coffees were, but it's very difficult to do that kind of thing. With especially the more like general varieties that we get in specialty coffee that are grown all over the place. They just vary so much due to terroir.
Let's talk about the SCAA. It's in Atlanta this year.
I'm going to turn the gas off.
And that's going to be held April 15th through the 18th.
That's right.
Gentleman Joe will be there at the Cafe Imports booth. And Nick, Steve, and I will be there at the Mill City Roasters booth. We'd like to meet you. So if you're in the Southeast, venture over. It's, I think, $185, something like that.
Something like that.
It's well spent. I've been to every one since 2006. We'd love to meet you. So if you do come in, please stop over at the booth. We'll be anxious to meet you. And we've got a surprise for you if you come to the booth and see what we're going to be doing in May and June with Cafe Imports on a little bit of roasting work.
And just for clarity, I will mainly be at the Roasters Guild booth along with the Roasters Championship competition that will be going on in the arena. I'll be heading that competition up and I'll be there talking with roasters, tasting coffee. We can go ahead and geek out on roast. On that Saturday, or I'm sorry, on the Friday, there's going to be open voting on 12 coffees. It's all going to be the same coffee roasted 12 different ways by 12 roasters, and you'll be able to vote on which one you like the best, and that will go into that roaster score. And that's a really interesting exercise because you really get to see a lot of different perspectives on one particular coffee. This is going to be a Brazil coffee. Then that next day, you'll be able to taste 6 different coffees from the 6 finalists that they chose and talk to them on Sunday about why they roasted the coffee a certain way, why they chose the certain coffee that they roasted, why they had roasted the Brazil the way that they had roasted it. So it's a really good opportunity to talk to other roasters and geek out.
About how many roasters will be entered?
40 will be entered.
Whoa!
We'll pare it down to 12 that will be voted on, and then we'll pare that down to 6, and then on Sunday we'll find out who those top 6 were, and then Sunday evening we'll give them their ranking, and yeah, first place gets a pretty awesome prize. They get a trip to Brazil, they get a trip to the Roasters Guild Roasters Guild retreat, so it's a pretty great.
Are you a judge?
I am the head judge, yep.
Can you be bought?
I cannot be bought,
Okay, just clarifying.
but you can try.
All right. Joe, let's do this. Let's move into Green's defects.
Sounds great.
And
I'm gonna cross your path.
I'm going to turn the gas off on the roasters. And why don't you let those watching in know 2 objectives you'd like to be teaching here
You bet.
in the next 25 minutes.
Okay, and before I move right there, I'm gonna show you guys an up-close picture of our roast here.
320.
Okay. Here's what we just roasted, just for your visual pleasure. You can see that it still has a little bit of wrinkling to it. Very nice light roast, very smooth throughout the roast. We didn't move too quickly through this roast. We gave it a lot of time in development, so that should open up those dense characteristics quite nicely. Thank you. So we're gonna talk a little bit about defects and what a defect is when it comes to green coffee. So the SCAA has very specific guidelines on the acceptance of a coffee that you have contracted or that you have purchased. So when you contract a coffee, as you get larger in your roasting, there are several different terms on those contracts. One of those is subject to approval of sample, no approval, no sale. Well, how do you go about saying that you're not going to approve a sample? One of the key ways is by green coffee grading if there are a certain number of defects. And the SCAA has mapped these out and has very strict guidelines on this. You can see here, this is a cool poster. This is an older version. They have a newer version that's 18 by 18. But this is just a black piece of paper where you can take your sample, and it should be a 100-gram sample that you put on your paper. And then over here, it has the specific guidelines for how many of what kind of defect is acceptable or no longer acceptable. And the unacceptable number of defects is 1 full defect. So over here it has a map of exactly what 1 full defect equates to if you're seeing partial defects on a specific coffee. So your full defects are going to be full black, full sour, a dried cherry or pod, fungal damage, severe insect damage, or some kind of foreign matter, which was hard to read upside down for some reason. And then your partial categories are partial black, partial sour, parchment, or pergamino. It takes 3 of those to equal 1 full defect. Your floater, your immature or unripe, your withered, your shelled, broken, chipped, or cut, hull or husk, and those take 5 to equal 1 full defect. And then a slight insect damage, so like 1 little pinhole or a couple of little holes from an insect, it takes 10 of those to equal 1 full defect. So what do those defects look like? Well, you can get on the SCAA's website and buy a little booklet that you can flip through, and it gives you pictures of those, but we're also going to show you some defects here today. Okay, so let's just go through a few of these. We are. So we have our little handy camera here.
Nick will give us feedback on how that's coming out on your camera.
And these are called full sours. Now the major full sour here is going to be this little guy.
A little bit lower.
This will be a real full sour.
There you go, perfect.
That's a full sour. So you can see that it's dark. It's not black, but it's kind of got a brownish hue to it. It almost looks purplish or to what maybe a roasted coffee would look like, but it's still not yet roasted. Now, just because a coffee is not fully dark doesn't mean that it's not a full sour. This is also a full sour. If I turn it over, you can see that it has that purplish brownish color to it, and the entire bean is affected. Okay?
Is this where I ask you what causes that?
The full sour, I'm forgetting what causes the full sour. I believe that the full sour and the full black are some kind of a problem with the cherry itself before the cherry is picked.
Nutritional issue.
Nutritional issue or some kind of an infection.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% positive on that.
Some kind of pathology going on.
Yes. Whoop. Here's another look. Now this one has some green to it, so the entire seed is not affected, but most of the seed is affected. So that one would be called a partial sour. Okay?
So I'm going to sit here with 100 grams or 300 grams and do this.
100 grams.
Okay.
Yep. Now we have severe insect damage.
Insect predominantly CBB, coffee, berry borer.
Predominantly, yes. Although there are other insects that can damage the coffee. As a matter of fact, whenever I open this up, I don't know if you can see that tiny speck here off to the side, but that's a little piece of an insect that came out of that coffee. So this is a coffee seed that has been very much dismantled by insects. You can see deep into the coffee seed. Most of the coffee seed is eaten away. That is severe insect damage.
Joe, do you find the insect typically attacks that coffee berry at, where is it, the soft end, the endosperm, where the shoot would come up?
Not necessarily. It is a matter of wherever that insect falls on the cherry, it bores a hole straight through the cherry, and then it turns around once it gets through the seed and bores a hole straight through the seed again, and then it just keeps going in vertical directions through that seed. Now this one is a chipped bean. I want you to see this. This is a chipped bean, but that chipped bean has some insect damage around where the chip occurred. Okay, so that would be two different types of defects. It's chipped, but the chip is kind of displaying where there is some insect damage on the interior of that seed. So that would be partial insect damage, but it would also count as a chipped bean. Okay, another one that you may not see very often is called a withered bean. Now these beans are, they look like they're green coffee, kind of, but they look very, well, withered. They're shrunken, shriveled up, not a lot of material to them.
Nutritional issue again?
Yes, nutritional issue. Or, yeah, generally you'll have two seeds that will be in a cherry, and sometimes one of those seeds will draw all of the nutrition. And then there'll be a secondary seed with that that's much smaller and kind of cut off.
Thank you.
Okay? Here are a bunch of broken and chipped or smashed coffee seeds. Now these have been either messed up by your milling equipment, whether that milling equipment is the dry mill or the wet mill. Generally, if it's the wet mill, then you get this darkening coloration because there's fermentation that will take place on that coffee after it's been chipped. And if it's the dry mill, you'll just have a broken bean like that. And then if it's patio damage, you'll have a smashed seed, which the smashed seed can also occur by milling, but usually it's a lot more sturdy and dried by that point. So generally a smashing will take place on a patio.
While Joe's pausing, we'll get back to that question about
yes, thank you.
fast start, slow finish, or slow start, fast finish, I believe.
Maybe we can keep them in the container. We're getting some autofocus issues.
Oh, okay.
Try that.
Sounds great.
We'll just try stuff. That's what we do here at Mill City.
Doggone right.
So these are full blacks. Now you can see that the full blacks are much darker than the full sours were. Can you see those pretty well?
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Great. And a full black is one full defect. These taste horrible. Sometimes they'll have an iodine-like flavor to them. They're just really, really foul.
One bean will ruin a cup.
Yep, that's right.
That, I believe, is a nutritional issue again.
Now we'll have an interesting defect that we probably see a little bit more in specialty coffee, especially after you've roasted the coffee. And this is a defect we call shell. It's when one seed grows inside of another seed, and when they're roasting it particularly, and they swell and go through first crack, you'll see the two parts of the seed separate. They'll come apart, and one of them will be the shell that overwrapped the other seed. Now, these, it is arguable, will taste the same as the rest of the crop. However, once they've come apart, if they come apart early, that shell could over roast very easily. So it's still considered a defect. Or if they come apart and roast at the same rate, the argument is that that shell could stale a lot more quickly. It's basically a different density and bean size than the rest of the beans. So it's counted as a partial defect.
And I checked my own roast for these kind of things, and 9 out of 10 times, it is not over roasted relative to the rest of the roast.
Now these are what we would call husks. This is where there used to be a seed. It's a cherry that has been fully dried and then removed. A lot of times you'll get these in natural processed coffees, especially Brazil naturals, because a lot of times the Brazil naturals have been partially dried or fully dried on the tree. So those husks will get in there, and that is a partial defect. It takes 5 of those for a full defect. However, if the seed is still inside, this is what we call the dry cherry pod. The seed is still inside, and these are considered full defects. And I don't know why these are so much more looked down upon so much more than the husk, but that's just the way that the numbers shake out. Okay. And I believe that does it for us. Let me make sure. Oh yeah, we have one more here. This is your.
And then we've got that Puerto Rican
Yes.
coffee I'd like to show everybody.
These are called floaters. A floater looks like your general seed, but it's very, very light. It's not shriveled like your withered seed. It's just really light in color. And if you were to put it in water, it would float. Low density, so that means that it has had very little nutrition as it's been growing in that seed.
Joe, before we take a look at that Puerto Rican coffee that
Yes,
I
sir.
bought, when you were roasting commercially, you've got 12 sacks of 70 kilos each of a Guatemalan. You've approved it, you've purchased it, you're about to roast. How heavily are you going to go through that roast, either pre-roast or post-roast, for any kind of defects?
So the way that it generally works is if you have a defect that's continually occurring once you have purchased a coffee, then you have to figure out a solution for that. You've already gone through the process of scoring that coffee, so you're not going to be super analytical on it anymore. But as a roaster, you know when you drop it and you see nothing but Quakers that there's an issue. So sometimes coffee will do something, we call it running in grades, where you're at the mill goes through all of its processes, and that last bag that gets filled with a bunch of stuff that was at the bottom of the silo. There could be different things at play. So you really have to be careful about what you're calling defective or what you're not calling defective. Are you, when they loaded up the coffee, did that last bag get put on top and that's the first bag that you're opening and you're just like freaking out right away? You should be methodical in the way that you go about analyzing the rest of that coffee. So if we do see a problem, we'll go back to the coffee mass and we'll pull samples in a very methodical way. And we'll do the same analytics that we did in the beginning to make sure that we didn't get, lucky samples, because a lucky sample can happen, and a lucky sample can happen a couple of times. When you're relying upon 1 bean per 100 grams, which 100 grams is what, 300 beans, then that 1 bean may not be in that sample. It may not be 100% representative. There are strict guidelines to pulling representative samples. You have to pull 3 places on a bag. It has to be 10% of the overall bags, and that's all blended together, and then you're pulled from that random sample. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 100% representative. The thought behind defect calculations like this is and I forgot to show one more, the foreign material. Like for instance, we've all found rocks in our coffee, right?
Corn, kidney beans,
Yeah, all kinds of stuff, rocks and
bottle
sticks.
caps.
these are considered one full defect. So that if I found that little stick in one sample, that could negate me from buying that coffee. So you also have to take into consideration things like, you know, what if I got the one stick in the entire lot and the coffee tastes amazing? Well, that could be the case, but the way that the SCAA has delineated it is as if in every 100 grams you're going to find a stick. So that's a very different thing to think about. So there may be cases where you need to talk to your importer and say, hey, I've got one stick per 100 grams. I know that I approved that sample with one stick, but I didn't realize that you were giving me one stick per 100 grams in every batch of coffee. Is there any solution that we can reach? And then see if they'll take their coffee back. Any importer worth their greens will work with you generally. Thank you.
Let's do this.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to get back to the question, but before you do that, just pull out some of that Puerto Rican coffee. Hold the bag, not the label's name.
Right.
But hold that right up to there so they can see. This is a Puerto Rican coffee. I enjoy a good Puerto Rican coffee. Very simple, crowd pleaser, chocolates, nuts, you know, a solid 85 all day long. So I thought I'd grab some. Nice mild cup. Well, this is what I was sent as representatives of a green coffee. Nick, are you getting a good view on that?
Pretty good.
It's probably the worst coffee I've ever been provided.
So when you sort a coffee, it's really great to spread the coffee out and to start on one side and work your way to the other side. So as I'm sorting this out, I can see there's a floater. I can see that is a real good coffee. That is a floater. That is a floater. Withered.
And these floaters, is
Floater.
that something that's been inappropriately dried? Or
it could
is that
be something that was inappropriately dried or something that is very, very old. Your monsoon Malabars are almost all floaters.
White.
Because they're so old. So all of the organic material within that cellulose cell structure has been stripped out.
You ever seen such a bad sample?
Unfortunately, I have, but we get some pretty bad samples. This is a full black. This is a full black withered broken. This is a partial black.
There are two full blacks off by themselves on that left-hand side under roaster's
Oh, yeah.
field, and you can
Oh, yeah.
hardly see them against the black.
Two full blacks there. Here's another full black. This is an interesting one, okay? This one is full black and mold. You rarely see mold ever in specialty coffee.
So that, when you say mold, what's happened there is that has not been dried down to 10, 12% moisture.
We've got bug, we've got full sour. Here's a great example of a full sour. It's not fully black, it's got that coloration, but this is an immature withered full sour.
Good stuff.
We've got parchment with the coffee still in it, so that is your full defect right there. So this alone would have negated, if all of this would have been beautiful, just this alone would have been enough to result in this sample not being approved. We have shell, we have...
And you've done about 12 grams.
Yeah, this is wretched coffee.
Back to the drawing board.
So, you know, when you get a coffee like this, or you get a coffee, you know, as we are importers, when we get coffees this bad, it's probably not worth our time to really invest in seeing where they can make improvements, because the distance from where that coffee is to where it needs to be, this is, I would say, 99 to almost 100% defective. The distance there to move that needle is so great that even if they improve vastly, they're not going to get to that specialty coffee quality level. This is coffee, though, that will sell. Every coffee has a home. Somebody will buy this coffee. Somebody did buy this coffee.
Hey, all right.
And And this coffee will be drank by somebody, and there may be a person out there that will enjoy this coffee.
Well, it's Puerto Rican coffee, see?
That's right.
Okay. I bought that. I'm teaching a horticulture class, and I wanted coffee from Hawaii. I got some Kau Bourbon from Lori at Rusty's farm, and I wanted some Puerto Rican coffee for the class. And unfortunately, that got passed around the classroom. That's what we had to say. Joe, why don't you come to the foreground and talk about slow start, fast finish, fast start, slow finish.
You got it. I'm going to steal your seat.
Please.
Okay, so when you think about a coffee, you want to think about the density of that coffee. Not necessarily where's the coffee from, but what are the building blocks that make this coffee what it is. Altitude adds to density, so that's kind of a trick to know whether it's dense or not. Natural process coffees kind of subtract from density, so it could be really high grown, but if it's a natural process, it may not be as dense. So you want to check the density on your coffee. If your coffee is really dense, then that means it needs more time in that first part of the roast to take on heat, to move the heat from the outside to the inside of that coffee. If it moves too quickly, then you'll start roasting the outside of the coffee before you start roasting the inside of the coffee. On a coffee that is not so dense, it's going to move, you'll be able to move it more quickly through that initial drying stage or that endothermic stage, that stage where it's absorbing heat. But then if you move that coffee too quickly later, it's kind of like putting a jet engine on a motorcycle. It's going to get out of control. You won't be able to control it. So your lower density coffees, which are usually synonymous with lower grown coffees, you need to, or you can move them quickly out of your turnaround, but then you want to plateau them more early. Whereas your denser coffees, you need to take a slower turn, a slower buildup, and then you can go ahead and start moving them once they start taking on heat. However, if there's a lot of flavor in that coffee, there's an argument to be made for some of those really dense coffees to just go kind of slow throughout the roast, which is what we did here today with the Colombia. That's where taking a coffee, doing a few drastically different roasts, actually, this is a really good trick. Do 3 very different roasts on the coffee, and then take those 3 different roasts and see which one tastes the best. So then if you've overcorrected in one direction, you know which direction to move in when you take that roast. Then when you take that, when you decide this is the roast that tastes the best, that now becomes your new model. Then take that and do 3 smaller variations on that. So then you're honing in on where that roast is going to be best. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, let me see if I can summarize that, particularly relative to the kinds of questions that I get. When Joe's talking about doing 3 radically different roasts, for heaven's sakes, record your inputs. And don't do them so frequently you can't replicate them. Mm-hmm. I'll get a profile in and I'll ask, well, what was your gas setting at this point and what was your air? Well, I don't know. And so then you've got no place to build on.
That's right.
The other thing that I heard out of this, and I want to make sure I heard that, there is no hard and fast rule.
That is 100% accurate.
For fast start, slow finish, so on and so forth.
Right.
Any combinations of them. That often on the boards I see guys that swear by fast start, slow finish on a given coffee. I don't know that we can necessarily take that and overlay that on another Brazil, for example.
100% true. If you have 4 different coffees that are all the same density, then by virtue of having a hard and fast rule to density only, that tells you that you should roast all those 4 coffees the same. But the reality is those 4 coffees are densely packed with different compounds. And so the different compounds that each one have may need more or less time, may need more heat at one time than another time. So there's still variation even within dense coffees. So as soon as you get yourself pigeonholed into one thought process around roasting in general, you can tell yourself immediately that means I'm wrong somewhere else. So this game of roasting is really like a tug of war. For every win, there's going to be a loss. You're deciding when you build sweetness, for instance, that you're going to lower acidity. You're deciding when you want to bring out a floral note that you're going to drop the body. So there's always give and take, and there's always a shaping that goes on, and that shaping needs to be monitored, and the way that you monitor it is by tasting. So those 3 keys to roasting are know your machine, know the bean. So the machine is, what is your heat exchange like? How's your airflow work? How do you turn up the gas, and when do you turn up the gas? How are my outputs correlated to what's actually happening to the coffee? Knowing the bean means what density is it? What flavor notes does this coffee have? What are the varieties? What is the processing? How old is the coffee? And then finally, know how to taste. And knowing how to taste just means building that ability to taste and building that memory of your internal catalog of different flavor experiences that you've had overall, and especially within coffee.
Very good. Let's see if we can wrap it up. Joe's got a 4 o'clock that he's leading online relative to what? Roasting.
Yep.
So we're going to get him out of here on time today. We roasted the Colombia Huila Los Naranjos. It's available on the website. It is an excellent coffee at a very reasonable price, so be sure and check that out. Second of all, look for Joe and myself. Joe will be at both the Roasters Guild and at Cafe Imports, 15th through the 18th of April. I'll be at the Mill City Roasters booth. We'd love to meet you. So please come over and introduce yourself, and we can go from there.
We're much more handsome in person.
Yes, very much so. A little bit brighter.
It's not this well lit, right?
Yeah. We're working with some new lights today, so we'll see how it comes out. Joe?
Can I throw a plug out there?
Please do.
I have a new podcast with some friends at Cafe Imports. It is called Opposites Extract. It is a debate podcast about coffee, where we'll have a guest come in, and either myself or my friend Meister will debate that guest in a very formal sense, where we flip a coin and see which side we have to debate from on a coffee-related topic. I recorded one yesterday that was, is coffee fast food? We've had a recording of about latte art. Is latte art important or is it not important in specialty coffee? We've had one about, it is. We've had one about travel to origin and the repercussions ecologically of that travel to origin. So it's just a huge array. And we debuted, we have one out now that you can listen to, and then we have our episode 0, which kind of goes through what to expect. And we debuted at number 3 on the food charts.
Very good.
So it's pretty awesome. Please tune in.
Did Megan Kelly moderate that for you at all?
No.
No. Okay, good. Anything else we need to do to wrap up today?
I don't think so.
It's been a great session. Joe, thanks very much for superb education and trading. Look for us at the SCAA, and as well next month, I'd like to do grooming the roast.
Great.
And what you can learn about your roast by taking the time to groom it well.
I'll bring my razor.
Yeah. Thanks very much, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.